right, well, in true Hardrock fashion, here we are. I mean, afternoon rainstorms.
Yeah.
Here in the town of Silverton.
The usual.
The usual, yeah. What are you expecting for the forecast? There's supposed to be
It's
good amount
supposed to
of
be
rain?
more moisture tomorrow.
Okay.
I think starting at 9 a.m. instead of after lunch, like it's been the last week or so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
since
excited?
we've been hanging in Cunningham.
Yeah, we've been hanging in Cunningham, and I think that's the whole genesis of this is like anytime we meet up, your storytelling is phenomenal. Like I just love sitting around a campfire with Jeff Browning, just talking stories of Hardrock, of UTMB. So it's a long time coming, probably since last year, if not more. And yeah, I guess we'll just start here. After 20 years in the sport,
Yep.
after what, like 40 plus 100-mile finishes,
43.
150 plus ultras, do you still get nervous before one of these events?
No, I don't at all. I get a little anxious sometimes just to get it going because it's like the taper's hard to wait. Because I like to run and I like to be in these mountains and just kind of like, oh, I got to go do a 3-mile shakeout today on, close to town.
Yeah, just all that energy that
you're ready and you've trained hard and you've peaked and there's always a lot of pinned up energy. That's the part I have the most trouble with, I guess. But if I were going to pin it on something, but I don't really get nervous anymore. No butterflies, no nothing like that.
And that's just because you're dialed in, you're prepped.
And I've just been doing it so long. I mean, I've just done so many.
Yeah.
That you just, and it's such a long race. I get more nervous than a 50K because it's fast off the front, right?
Right, exactly.
You settle in 100.
You have time. So,
yeah, especially this race.
Well, let's talk about your longevity because I'm sure you get this question a lot, and I'm sure it's a variety of factors. But if you were to put like a podium almost, like a 1, 2, or 3 of what you would attribute to your longevity in the sport at such a high level, what would you say? Is it diet? Is it cross training? Is it recovery?
I'd say diet and cross training would be up there together. Mm-hmm. Diet probably 1, and close second would be strength and mobility. I really embraced it at a young age, strength training and mobility. But the diet thing, I kind of always been a tinkerer with diet, and was almost a nutrition major in college. So it's always been kind of a hobby. Kind of geeking out and stuff, vegetarian in my 20s, then whole foods organic diet for 14 years and then 13 years. And then, and now more recently, kind of more of a paleo kind of, primal blueprint. I don't know. There's all kinds.
You mentioned OFM too.
Yeah. OFM, optimized fat metabolism, high fat, low carb type approach, but eating from like a paleo food list. If you looked at a grocery list, you pull up, Google paleo grocery list, and I'm pretty much eating from that food list. So
what do you think the attribution is? Is it helping you recover?
Yeah, recovery is a big piece. I think that's what I see the most. Being able to keep a nice body weight, not gain. I was gaining a little bit in my mid 40s and on kind of more of a high carb approach, and I was able to kind of shed a few pounds slowly, like. That weight kind of slowly, some of that weight came back, which is interesting, but part of that's probably the strength training. I've really embraced that in my 40s, through my 40s. Now that I'm 50, it's been a decade of really re-embracing it. In my younger years, I was really into strength training before I even got into ultras. But, the diet thing has really, there's a noticeable difference in lack of inflammation and recovery. Yeah. And I told my wife in 2015, after 100-miler, and I was super swollen and inflamed, and I was like, I don't know how much more I can do this, after 20-some hundreds. And then I made this diet shift, and then I was like, it gave me, I feel like it reinvigorated my running. And
carbs are something that you introduce a little bit more.
I still use them. I eat a lot of fruit, but I just eat fruit, potatoes, and vegetables, kind of in that order.
Yeah, non-processed, non-starchy.
Yeah, no processed, and then a decent amount of meat, and a high protein approach. Yeah. It's probably 50, if you looked at it from a macros perspective, it's probably like, people ask me this a lot, 50, 30, 20, probably. 50% fat, 30% protein, and 20% carbs, and it's mainly from fruit and potatoes and some veggies.
And you're what now, 50, 51, going on 51?
Almost 51 in about 3 weeks,
Jeez
51.
Louise. I mean, I was saying this to you earlier back at Cunningham, but you look fantastic.
Thanks.
You got some kind of like crazy Benjamin Button thing going on, and
I got some white in here, man. In this beard.
But whatever you're doing, man, it's clearly working. Your longevity is incredible. You're, like I said, 20 plus years, and you're not just like getting by and like eking your way through these ultra marathons. You're competing. You're winning a variety of 100-milers and like sub hundreds. It's really incredible to watch.
Yeah, it's been fun, I have to say, and I'm still motivated too to train hard. I think you have to be motivated,
Well, what is that motivation if it's not fear? I guess in that other direction, is it just trying to get the best out of your body and out of life?
I still love the training. I mean, mountain running and trail running is amazing training. Yeah. Like if you like to be in the woods.
Yeah.
And I live in a location where I can pretty much run trails and woods every day. So.
Well, let's talk about your origin story. I know you had like a mountain biking background, maybe ski background, but when did you really fall in love with the running aspect of it, the trail running aspect of it, and when did you find out you were good at it?
Well, I came from mountain biking kind of background. I got into mountain biking in the early 90s, and all through college or second half of college and through my 20s, I was mainly mountain biking, climbing, and backpacking a little bit. And then I kind of started dabbling. I'd always been a runner on the side, like 2, 3, 4 days a week with my dog. Mm-hmm. Keep my dog from chewing up the couch or something.
Yeah.
You can relate now. You got a dog. You haven't had it home yet, so you don't know if it's going to chew things up. They do chew things up. But I kept exercising the dog, and it just gave me another outlet. When I mountain bike maybe 4 days a week. And so the other few days I would run. So I was always like, if you look back, I was always endurance training. And then I played 4 sports a year in junior high and high school. So, and lifted weights even in high school back in the 80s. I started lifting, free weights in the 80s. But I think part of it is when I came to Bend, Oregon in 2000, I really started getting into trail running. I had a friend, Rod Bean, who got me in Bend, who got me I was trying to get him into mountain biking. He was trying to get me into trail running, and he kind of won. Ironically, though, he did eventually get into mountain biking on the side as a cross training for ultra running. But Rod and I, trained a ton together in the early days, and we were both we didn't come from like a competitive background, like, collegiate running or anything like that. So we just were doing it for fun and adventure, and we weren't training, like there's no specific training we weren't doing speed work. And
you were 30 at this time?
I was 29 for my first ultra.
Okay.
And then turned 30.
Yeah. It's pretty late.
Yeah, pretty late.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was early. 2001 was
you were the young buck. They were all like
everybody
old.
was 40s and 50s back then. So we were like, whoa, we're super young for this sport. And then, we did that for a few years and like just kind of finishing them and run Western States. We wanted to run Western States.
Yep.
And ran that in 2002 as my first 100. And that's when I got an inkling that I might have some potential, because I ran sub 24 my first attempt. And then I started to Sean Meisner basically told me how to try to get sponsored. And so I got like on the JV Montreal Patagonia team.
It's on the heels of Western States?
Yeah, after Western States. So 2003, I got on they had like an A, B, and a C team. I was on the C team.
But yeah, the fact that you can still get on a C team with a sub 24 is
back then, but sub 24 was like, there weren't that many people going sub 24.
Yeah.
Maybe I think I don't remember what I was that year, like what place. I might have been like 25th or something. But it was enough. They had like kind of this like a little ambassador program for like people that were maybe up and coming. And so I got on it. And then that's when I started to say, well, I kind of want to try to race these. And then I was injured all the next year when I decided I wanted to race.
Just from high mileage?
Yeah,
or
well,
like
I come from cycling. So like I had some muscle imbalances from cycling and, kind of a quad hamstring muscle imbalance. And so I really fought like runner's knee and IT band syndrome and I kept having setbacks. I trained for, 3 or 4 months, run an ultra, get back on the horse, and then would get injured.
Yeah.
And so that was like, 03 sucked. And then I came back and ran Wasatch in 04 as my second 100, and I got 5th. And that's when I was like, I think hundreds are my thing, and I still hadn't figured them out that much when I look back now.
Yeah.
But I was like, I think I can do better at these, and that was a motivator. And so then and then in 05, I won Bighorn. And that's from there, I started really dialing, kind of really improving.
Did you have any heroes? I mean, back then, we're talking
Scott
mid-aughts.
Jurek.
Yeah, Scott Jurek.
And Carl Meltzer.
Yeah.
And Hal. Hal was a young buck back then.
Hal Kerner.
Yeah. He was winning he had, at that point, I think he'd won Bear 100 a couple times. So, those guys were kind of, and they were all on the Montreal Patagonia team, but they were on the A team, I was on the C team.
Right.
But they were all like, I was looking up to those guys, they were in Ultrarunning magazine and, in ads.
So what blueprint did you have to really work off of? Was it blogs? Is it conversations and relationships with these guys?
Back then, blogs, right. Yeah. Blogs were one of them. I read a ton of blogs. I bought, anytime my wife's kind of a book collector. We have a small library, and anytime she'd come across any kind of training book, she would pick it up at a garage sale or a library that was having a sale, one of their annual sales.
But not a whole lot of ultramarathon.
No, nothing.
This is all actually Jack Daniels or
Running the Lydiard way. Arthur Lydiard was the first one that I really got a hold of as far as training, and that's who I used for myself.
And refresh for my audience who just what his general philosophy is.
Arthur Lydiard is very similar to Jack Daniels and Bill Bowerman. Bill Bowerman got a lot of his concepts from Lydiard, and which was basically higher mileage marathon training for middle distance running, and And so I just got a hold of hey, you need to be training at least 6 days a week or strive to get there. I couldn't always in the first 5-6 seasons because of some of the muscle imbalance stuff, but I finally fixed it in 04, 05 and 05, 06 off seasons. I worked with a personal training coach. I was a graphic designer and had some trade out. I couldn't afford to pay a personal trainer at the time, but I worked some trade out deals, and he got me really strong and fixed that muscle imbalance. He's the one that diagnosed the muscle imbalance and said, hey, your quads are supposed to be stronger than your hamstrings, and you're the opposite because of your cycling background. And so that really fixed my knee issues, and then I quit getting injured. And then that's when I kind of re-embraced strength training. I'd been really into strength training in my younger years, and more as a musclehead than I was I just wanted to be big. But I don't have the genetics to be big, I have lanky arms, so you can't have big biceps when you have lanky arms, long arms. And so anyway, I totally, between Lydiard's kind of philosophy, and he's the one that kind of outlined hey, you shouldn't train back-to-back hard days, right? The basics, I learned the basics from his book. And then really kind of that was the start of me trying to train intelligently. And then coupled that with a bunch of strength training and from 04 through on.
And is that more stressing quality over quantity? And
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and strategic speed work and your long run a week. I didn't really ever start doing back-to-back long runs. For a while, years. I just couldn't handle it. I could be on a bike. I could do 4 hours on a bike the day before a long run or the day after a long run, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't do 2 back-to-back long runs. Usually it was just too risky to get injured. So I quit doing it, and I just started kind of using the bike a little bit still for a lot of years until I really could handle the volume.
Okay. So that's something that as a coach, which is your other half of your profession is as a professional runner and a professional coach, is that something that I don't exactly know what the science is these days about the back-to-backs, but is that something that you incorporate? Because
I do it if it depends on the athlete.
Okay.
And depends on their schedule too, what they can do. But some do the traditional long run and then 2/3 of that long run the next day, and some, especially if they've been running for a long time, they can handle it. But a lot of runners can't. And so I found that a good example is maybe having some time during the week where they could do a double or a longish run and then have their weekend long run. They're still getting 2 longish runs a week, right? They're just not back to back. But you're still getting the volume.
Yeah, I don't know if that was something. I mean, that's something I've always heard ever since I've been in this sport. I just don't know if the science backs that up or if that's just something.
I think it's beneficial because you're coming back and running on tired legs. I found that blocked training, so like say like a 3-day block, like strategically, let's say 3, 5, 7 weeks out from a peak event, you would do like a 3-day block where you might do like progressively more volume of running each day, and the longest runs on the last day, because you actually bounce back. That's how I switched it around. I started doing these little mini blocks. Was my first introduction to like kind of back-to-backs. Instead of doing it the traditional way that everybody was passing around in the 2000s of how to train.
Right.
There's no coaches back then for ultra running, at least. And so we were just all just trading notes all the time. And so, or you're reading someone's blog, right, on training. So like I quit doing, I didn't do the back-to-back because I kept getting injured. So I was scared to get injured. So I would do, like say a 6-miler in the morning on Friday and a 6-miler in the evening. And then like on Saturday, a 12-miler, and then a 20-miler on Sunday. So you're going to bounce back from those shorter workouts and not dig as big a hole. Mm-hmm. There's just a high risk when you go run a 25-miler on Saturday and then go try to run a 15-miler or a 12-miler on.
Yeah, I was going to say, what was your last
Sunday.
major injury since that muscle imbalance issue you had going on?
2020. It's all been unrelated to training. It's been like pickup soccer game with my nephews and my kids, like hard with the dad, playing against the parents or playing against the dads.
But no overuse.
Not overuse.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't had an injury. Oh, man, I'm trying to think. That was caused by overtraining type of, or just
right,
training
because you're just such a model of consistency, not even in the training approach, but in the output.
But no one sees the early years because we didn't have any of this media and social media right. So the early years when I started winning like in 2005 through probably 2014, I only did one. Well, from 2001 through 2007, I only did 100 a year. And then in 2 of those years, I didn't do hundreds. So I only did 5. For 5 years, I did 1 a year. Mm-hmm. And then starting in 2007, I started doing 2 a year, but really spread out. So I did 200s a year. And then after the strength training is when I really quit getting injured. And I learned to like balance cross training and strength training with it. I wasn't doing as much strength training as I am now, but I was, after that stints with the coach in the off season, I really like kind of re-embraced strength training and started using it. I got into P90X, and if anybody knows that Beachbody kind of, the CDs or whatever, the DVDs, I had those, and I learned a lot of like my Tough 21 that's like on Ultrarunning Magazine's website, on their YouTube channels. That's an example of like Beachbody was an influence on that. But I was just trying to come up with something that was like super time efficient too, because I had a full-time graphic design business and 3 kids, and trying to raise a family and
is this something you sprinkle in throughout the week, or is this something that you dedicate on, like, say, a recovery day?
No, I do. Well, now I do a lot more now. In my 40s and late 40s, I really started embracing it. In my 50s, I really kind of got really consistent. So I do strength. I do weighted strength twice a week. It's like dumbbell work, like deadlifts and squats and stuff like that, Bulgarian split squats. And then I do push-ups and pull-ups for upper body mainly, some flies and overhead presses. And then that's twice a week, and a bunch of core. And then 3 days a week, other days a week, and most weeks. It's not every week. Like this week is a special week because I'm tapering. But normally, like a normal week, I'd train 5 days a week on strength. So 3 of the days would be body weight. It'd just be push-ups, pull-ups, 4 core exercises, and 4 lower body exercises, like air squats, side lunges, deep knee, forward lunges.
And what about sleep? How does that play into your recovery?
In the early days, I was on and off because I was a graphic designer and I had deadlines, and sometimes I was, up till 4 a.m, on a deadline. So my training was really crazy at different crazy hours. I would go out and run at like 11 o'clock at night with a headlamp, especially when I had little kids in the house. And sleep now, I'm pretty consistent with like 7 to 8 hours, and like at least once a week I get 9. I definitely, like, the older I get, the more I realize I need sleep.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, do you feel your age? Because you're still high energy, you're still outputting on a tremendous level. Like, do you feel your age these days now?
Sometimes.
And what does that look like?
I think I notice it with my youngest son, because we have, we have 19, 16, and 11. And I notice it when I compare my old young self raising my oldest son, who's almost 20. He turns 20 next week. And then I have a 11-year-old. He's super high energy like I am. But I don't have this gigantic energy that I used to have, like to be like, yeah, let's go do this. I'm like, I trained today. I'm freaking just want to sit on the couch, man, and read a book. Yeah. I'm 50,
I'm 50.
Exactly. So I think sometimes my wife and I kind of talk about how I try to be conscious of that, not be quick to say no to everything, because you find yourself when you're older, like with kids, it's different. You're like, no, I don't really want to do that right now. I don't want to go outside and battle with swords. Yeah. Which with my oldest, I would have been like, yeah, let's go do it. I would have been trying to be fun dad. Now I'm kind of like old curmudgeon dad a little bit sometimes. And I feel bad about it sometimes. Like I do feel guilty about that sometimes. Like, so I'm sometimes I'll start to say no and be like, no, wait, no, why am I saying no? Like, you got to look at yourself and go internally and go, why am I saying no? It's because I'm freaking 50 and lazy, because I just want to sit around because I've already trained today. I've already done strength today. I've already run because I prioritize it.
Well, I know you wear a lot of hats, but you seem to juggle it well. One of my favorite pieces of, I don't know if you would call it advice or Browningism, is the concept of spreading the peanut butter. I don't know if that originated with you or not, but
it originated from Rock Horton.
Okay. Well, elaborate on that and how it applies to ultra running, because it's one of my favorites. It's so simple, but it's like perfect.
So it originated. The first place I ever heard it was from Rock Horton, who 10-time Hardrock finisher, gave back to the sport 9 years of volunteering for the sport, was on the board. Is now retired from the board and retired, but he told me the story, but Joe Grant reminded me of the story last year at Hardrock, because Joe is, at Virginia's Pass. He's the new aid station captain there. And I'd gone up to see him. My tradition is to go up on Mondays to see at the Virginia's Pass and see what the snowfields are like and what the conditions are like. And he was up there, and we talked about it, and he reminded me of this story. And it's basically, and then Courtney DeWalter at the start line last year, it was her first year, and she looked at me and she goes, Browning, like, give me some advice. You're a veteran. Like, what should I, last minute advice? We're standing at the start line, at 5:55 in the morning. And she goes, I said, okay, you have like a really nice, like, bakery piece of sourdough bread, right? And you have one slather of peanut butter on a knife. That's your effort. Now you need to spread that over the whole piece of bread, and don't slather it on too thick early, because you'll have dry toast at the end. And so she said, if I'm going too fast, just yell peanut butter. Well, she ended up puking and dropping. I just saw her today, and I just said peanut butter.
But just that image of, the spreading the peanut butter is just like so perfect. And so
it's just got to be a really consistent, easy, like equal effort through the whole race. You can't surge in this race either. Hardrock's very unique in that respect. Like, there's a lot of hundreds where I've done tons of surges in the middle of the race to like try to win or get the lead or try to hold the lead or whatever. But in this race, if you try to surge in one section, the next section sucks. Because it's just because of the altitude. Yeah. And it's so big.
Yeah, it's so insane. Well, one of the times that you didn't maybe heed your own advice, but you tell me, because I think more impressive than your 150 ultra marathon finishes is your one DNF, and that came recently.
Two. One was an injury. One was when I rolled my ankle really bad in 2015 at UTMB. That was my first DNF ever.
That was your first go at UTMB.
It took 15 years to get my first DNF. And then I DNF'd last year, was really one of those DNFs that I like caused myself at Western States last year. I just went out too hard. I mean, I went back and crunched all my splits, and I was over a minute a mile faster to escarpment than I'd ever been. I was over a minute a mile faster to the first aid station than I'd ever been. And I just blew up. And I also had bought a house, and we'd renovated it, and I'd done a ton of work in May because we just bought a house in Flagstaff. So I'm sure that was a factor. I was just worn out. I was burning the midnight oil, man, all of May. So and then I was just moved to altitude a few months to higher altitude.
In Flag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I basically almost doubled my altitude of where I've been living. So I think that all of those were contributing factors, but I just ran like an idiot too. I ran like, I hadn't run that stupid in 100 since 2005. Or no, 2007 Hardrock. 2007 Hardrock was my 5th 100, and I had never been on this course, and I showed up and slept in an old janky altitude tent for 4 weeks and thought I was a stud because I'd won Bighorn twice in a row, and I came here and I raced really hard the first like 40 miles, and then it hit me like a freight train, and I just death marched it in. I finished, but I had to sleep 45 minutes at Chapman, and I just was trudging. It was horrible. And then that was a learning experience. And from that point forward, I was very conservative starting off in hundreds. Like from that point forward, that was my MO. Like I am not going to make that mistake again. And I didn't do that for however many years, 2007 to 2021.
It's amazing that even the great Jeff Browning sometimes forgets to spread the peanut butter evenly.
It was a really good reminder.
Well, you learn, I would say the lessons you learn from your failures are, more like seared into your psyche than the successful.
Oh, I'll never make that mistake again.
Yeah.
I'm 50 now. I'm not making that mistake again because it was painful. I've never had blown quads, and that was the first time. Another
like really fun aspect of just seeing you race is how you work the aid stations. You're almost like a Formula One pit crew. You know exactly what you want. Boom, 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 boom. In and out. Talk about some of that approach and what you're doing.
Well, I think part of that was honed in the early years when there was no like, you didn't really have crew very often in the early days. And back then I felt obligated to at least buy their hotel room and some food, and I didn't have that much money. So, I basically, we had little kids in the house when I first starting to race hundreds and win. And so I just went off drop bags. I learned at Bighorn, I cut my teeth like just going off drop bags. And then when I started using crew, that was just icing on the cake because I got into the point where I was really efficient with a drop bag. Everything's in a little Ziploc and that's it. Just grab the Ziploc and go. Refill your waters. While they're filling the waters, you're in your drop bag getting the Ziploc, and then you take everything out of the Ziploc, all your nutrition, and put it in your pockets on the fly. And that was kind of my early, trying to be efficient. And then once I had crew, then you got people who are just, we're swapping bottles whenever I see them, and they're handing me the Ziploc. I don't even have to get in my drop bag anymore, So I still do the drop bag though.
What do you take in on race day?
A little bit, about half of my calories, about 200 calories an hour, 250 calories an hour, depending on the hour. And about half of that's from liquid calories from GU Roctane, non-caffeinated. So that's the baseline, no caffeine. Then I use strategic gels here and there, some caffeine for at night. And then what else? Well, a little bit of potato chips, a little bit of potatoes, a little bit of fruit at the tables. That's it.
Will that change depending on the race? Like a Western States versus a Hardrock?
Nope.
Western States,
I might eat a little more. Like I for this race, I have some like boiled cube potatoes with sea salt and butter, in a Ziploc. Mm-hmm. But like, a few cubes, like I'll carry with me, and some potato chips. But that's it. I keep it pretty simple. Like anything that looks really good, like real food, I always tell myself save it for after the race. You can't digest it anyway. It's just a rock in your gut. Yeah. It's like an hour later you're taking a pit stop or you're puking because your body can't digest it anyway. So I try to keep it really simple. Yeah, Vespa too. That's the other thing that's in the mix.
When I'm looking at your ultra marathon or ultra sign up resume, it's really a really diverse set of races that I found kind of interesting. Anywhere from, all over the U.S. and now international. You sprinkle those more in. Throughout the resume, and you have races like Western States, obviously, Hurt 100, 3 days of Silamo, Ultra Trail Mount Fuji, like Pinhoti, Tarawera. Like, tell me about your just approach in selecting races. Is it based on adventure and exploring new places?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's number one. I love like if I hear about a cool course, I want to go run the race. Like it's on my bucket list, right? And then there's other like kind of staples, like Western States is its own cool race, right?
Sure.
It's like competition and everything else that goes along with it, and racing for the top 10 is so fun. So it's hard to say no to, as long as you're in the top 10, it's like, well, why wouldn't I come back?
Yeah.
And then also like Hardrock, the ones I've done the most are Western States and Hardrock, and that's more because of the tradition, the competition. I mean, the San Juans are amazing. I love that you have to commit here to do okay. You have to come early. You have to, that's part of the allure here. Is it's not just show up and race, and you're there for 4 days. You have to come here for like at least a week before, preferably 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Or come here for a training block in the 3 to 4 weeks out and then come back, a week early.
But way laid back versus, say, a UTMB, right?
Yeah.
It almost, in the ethos of treating it like a run instead of a race, there is that duality. I think that makes it kind of cool in that we can hang out in the days leading up to the race at Cunningham. You're cooking up steak on your Weber grill. We're exchanging stories and talking about a whole wide range of shit.
Totally.
Yeah, that'll remain between us. But yeah, I mean, but when it's go time, it's go time, and you have.
Yep.
You're quickly reminded that you're racing against the likes of Francois and Killian and Courtney.
Yeah. Hopefully I'm just lurking in back there, ready like a shark to pick up the pieces.
Yeah.
One
particular race I want to ask you about is your Hurt race in 2016. And the only reason it jumped out is because I hadn't heard many stories about this particular race where you went up against Gay Robbins and Yassine and Nicodemus. Is there anything that stands out?
And who else was in that? What's his name?
Avery Collins.
Avery Collins was in it. Yeah, Avery was in it. What stands out about that race? That was my first race on OFM. I'd made the shift like 7 weeks before. Zach Bitter and Peter Defty at Vespa had like really mentored me, helped me with the shift, and I was on kind of a crash course, in OFM and fat adaptation. But it was really like eye-opening. In one, I went half the calories I normally would have taken in 100. And at that point, I had 2200s, under my belt. So I had a lot of data to compare it to. All of a sudden, I'm doing half the calories. I never bonked. I felt awesome the whole race. I was on and basically just kind of mile 27 had Gary and Avery on my right on my heels out of the aid station on the climb, and about halfway up the climb I looked back and they're gone. Like I just dropped them without even trying. And I was like, there might be something to this. Because I feel really strong. And I felt consistent the whole way. And before that, I'd always dealt in hundreds with somewhere in the race you're gonna bonk a little. Have a rough patch. Where you're like, whoa man, my energy's really low, I didn't take enough gel, or I need a gel, or something. Whereas this all of a sudden was like, whoa, I'm kind of bonk proof. That's kind of cool. So that really stood out to me, that race. That was probably the biggest, because even after the race, I was just freaking out the whole time. I was just I was kind of my typical spazzy self. and I was just animated, I was just freaking out. I was taking pictures of my ankles and my knees and texting it to my wife in Oregon and was like, hey, look at my ankles. Oh my gosh, they're not swollen like they normally. I mean, there was some micro swelling, but not crazy, ballooning up like it normally would. I was just freaking out. And Bitter had told me, he emailed me right before the race and said, hey, get ready for the recovery. It's going to kind of blow your mind. And
wow.
And I thought, you don't really think much about that, right? I just kind of let that kind of soak in and whatever, But then afterwards, it kind of was like, whoa. And that really hit home hard. How much I recovered, how fast. I was doing air squats the day after I finished,
How hard is it to stay disciplined, though? You have 3 kids. I'm sure their food cravings range from...
No, they are... My wife, I got to give her credit in this because she's the one driving... She was always the one driving diet. She wanted to go kind of paleo a long time ago, but I wouldn't. So we never fully did, but she's always kind of driven the nutritional train, and my kids have been brought up on basically reading labels, hey, don't eat that. Like I had my oldest when he was like 12 and my youngest was like probably a little toddler we were in Whole Foods and I'm riding down they have the samples out.
Yeah.
And they had animal crackers out. Well, my son loved, my older one, he loved all of the samples, and he would go make a round through the samples when we hit the grocery store, right? Well, he'd already hit everything, but he reads all the labels. Like 12 years old. And he's like, I have the tongs, and I'm picking up an animal cracker, and I'm getting ready to give it to my youngest, my toddler, and I was getting ready to eat one, and he comes walking at me with his hand out like, Dad, no, you can't have that, it has sugar in it. Like he's telling me I can't have it. And so that's all my wife.
But is it?
And they still eat that way. Now they aren't like super crazy strict. We've taught them but the whole time we've taught them why. So like that's been easy. Like at home, it's easy to be that way because that's what we have in the house. We don't keep junk in the house. Like if I'm gonna do any kind of, I kind of always, we were talking about this at Cunningham. Like it's 80% of the time. Like I'm on the straight and narrow 80 to 90% of the time, and that leaves 2 to 4 meals a week where I'm like might loosen the reins a little bit, right?
So what's your biggest Achilles heel when it comes to diet stuff, food stuff?
Bakery chocolate chip cookies, like a good one, not like a whole package, like one good one. Like I love chocolate chip cookies, and there's a coffee shop bakery in Flagstaff that does paleo chocolate chip cookie, so grain free. Mm-hmm. So I'm still, but I could go freaking mow a lot of those. Like after these races, like after 100-miler, I'm there at least 3 times this next week.
Awesome.
Like I'll be in like, you guys got any paleo cookies? Because they sell them real quick. So sometimes I'll get shut down, and I just have to get a coffee.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at somebody like The Rock, for instance, right? Somebody who stays disciplined and doesn't necessarily need to tout it or brag about it every single day. But my favorite posts of his are his cheat meals. He'll allow a Sunday cheat meal, and it's usually giant chocolate chip cookies or something with a shit ton of carbs. And it's just like, dude, like allow yourself to enjoy life a little.
That and pizza and beer. Yeah. Like a good like Pizzicletta in Flagstaff.
Oh yeah.
Like at Dark Sky, because they have their own like they have like a separate. They sell out of, they have their own location in Flagstaff, but they also have a location in Dark Sky Brewery. And I do miss pale ales. Like pale ale is one of my favorite beers. And they have a good pale ale. And so like I'll go have one pale ale, occasionally two. And then eat a bunch of pizza with my kids and let them eat pizza. And then we're back on the straight and narrow for the next week.
And it's good quality ingredients.
Yeah,
I know
it's good,
they do a great job of sourcing their
They do a great job.
Yeah.
Amazing place.
Well, let's go back to your running resume because there's another race that stands out to me is your 2017 UTMB, Ultra Trail du Mont Blanc, which is still to this day a ridiculously stacked field. The venerable who's who of, at least on the male side, ultra running from all over the world, with the exception of, say, Luis Alberto. You saw Zach Miller, you saw Francois Dehaene, Kilian Jornet, Diba was there, you name it, on and on and on.
Get him Asgrenius. Yeah, like all of them. There was a huge field.
And you had yourself a day, despite all that competition.
I had
you had
amazing
a tremendous
time.
day. Yeah.
Amazing time, but 20th. Like if you look back at I had looked at the history of the sport going into that race, history of that race, and been like, okay, if I'm sub 23, I will be probably most years I'll be in the.
Hey, buddy. We're greeted by a friend here, Boots.
Yeah.
Hi, Boots. We're just doing an interview.
I just was like, okay, I should be in the top 10, and probably most years the top 5, maybe even a shot at the podium if I'm under 23 hours. And that year I ran 22:50 something.
55.
Yeah, you looked it up?
Yeah, I looked it up.
Yeah, 22:55, and I got 20th. It was a crazy year. And ever since then, it's never been that stacked again. It was that year.
Yeah.
Jim was in it too. That was Jim's first.
Of course, Jim Walmsley.
Yeah,
I mean, what was it like standing at the start line, looking around, going, "Holy crap!" Like,
even back then, you don't even know everyone, because it's Europe. So you kind of know some of the guys, but I still was like, you know what? They go out so fast here. I'm just gonna like run my race, and I'm gonna pick up the pieces. Schlarb was there that year. It was a huge field. It was crazy year, but I don't know what else to say about
Yeah,
it, but
yeah, no,
then,
it
like
was-
I kind of want to go back to that race just to try to run a similar time and see where I ended up.
Yeah.
You
know. Before we get into Hardrock 2022, I have to ask you about your rim to rim to rim, or your double
rim to rim to rim.
Double rim to rim to rim.
That's the easiest way to say it.
Playground you're no doubt familiar with now as a resident of Flagstaff, Arizona. What was this about? Like, when did it become interesting to you, and when did you decide, like, I'm going to go after this?
I heard about it about 4 or 5 years ago. I was kind of geeking out on some FKT on the FKT site, and someone had told me, I can't remember even who told me, but someone told me no, there's more than just rim to rim FKT.
Right.
I was like, what? You mean somebody does a double of it? Like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. Well, at that point, I think Rob Carr might have had the FKT at the time, and I was like, well, I can't beat Rob Carr in the canyon, but I could maybe, knock out a double. So it just kind of sat in the background. I shelved it, and I never lived close to the canyon. I'd never run rim to rim, so I didn't even know what I could do there. I'd always lived up in the Pacific Northwest, or Montana or whatever, or Utah. So finally, when we moved down there, it really started to once I'd done rim to rim a few times, and just really started to know, like, oh yeah, I know all the trails, I know where the water is. It starts to become your backyard a little bit after a few times.
It's a hell of a backyard, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's a huge backyard.
I geek out about Grand Canyon.
It's so
anyone
amazing.
who's willing to listen.
It's just so different than any other mountain run or any kind of mountain kind of adventure.
Yeah,
because it's inverse.
It's like boom.
Yeah, it's the complete opposite of every other mountain run. And I think that's what makes it so hard, but it also makes it like really good for training as a training stimulus, because you're finishing on an uphill every time. No matter what training run you do there, you're always finishing uphill. So it just kind of like sat there, and then after I'd done it a few times, I really put it together in about a 6-week window. I just started like saying, you know what, I'm going to put this together. I had a buddy who said, oh yeah, I'll help you crew. And then I reached out to Derek Lytle, and he was already going to be in the canyon on another project for video. And I was like, hey man, I really want to, being a graphic designer and former art director, I love this kind of stuff. I'm not the kind of athlete that goes, oh man, I got to go to a video shoot. I like that stuff. So like, my art director side comes out. And so Derek and I geeked out. Like, we went on a couple training runs in the canyon while I was training for it, and like talking about where we're going to shoot and like all that kind of stuff, and how we're going to do it, and logistics and GoPros. And, so it was fun. So that was a whole nother creative side that I got to experience with it. That was really fun for me too.
Yeah, it was all documented and released on YouTube. I believe it's called Keeping It Tactical.
Keeping It Tactical. Yeah. We have an old saying, like I have a couple of crew guys that crew for me a lot. And I have one of my buddies who used to be a hunting guide in Alaska. And anytime we do something like super efficient, he'd be like, ooh, keeping it tactical. And so that's always been our saying. He's like, oh yeah. Like when we're going over our spreadsheet before a race, he's like, oh yeah, I like that. Keeping it tactical, man.
Yeah, man. So, I mean, that I think in a nutshell describes your career. But did it ever become like too much of a good thing? Like almost like just going to that buffet and eating? Because the Grand Canyon is awesome for a single rim to rim, but I don't know. Did you have any low moments? Did you have any moments where you're just like, oh man, like another lap? Going back and forth. I
never did that day. I think mentally was ready for the 2 times, and plus I had a guy pacing me the second lap. I had guys that selflessly hiked down into the canyon to support me in the canyon at night. They hiked down there at 10 o'clock at night. And I started at midnight, so they were down in the canyon all night with no sleep. So like for me, that was like, I feel like I owed it to those guys to like, there's no complaining.
Yeah. And you're making a film.
Yeah, and you're making a film, so that gives you a little bit of a motivator too,
sure.
right? You can't look stupid on video.
Yeah, or bitch and whine too much.
Yeah, exactly. But I felt good the whole time. I felt on. And I had great weather. I happened to get a storm cell come through. And, originally I was thinking, man, this is going to suck. I wanted like a bluebird day, but it would have been
in May? When was the actual date?
April 22nd.
Okay.
So it's one of those kind of transition towards the end of April. It starts getting really hot in the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's usually that time of year, like it was around the day, it was in the 90s down at Phantom Ranch, but it ended up being in the 70s on the day I did it. Because as we were watching, it was only one day out of like a 10-day forecast that there was supposed to be weather, and it was on the day we'd planned it. We even talked about moving it. And then finally we kind of just said, you know what? If you have bad weather, it's going to, Derek was like, it'll look epic, dude, on video, if we have storms. And we did. We had snow flurries and like rain and on and off and a bunch of wind at the rim. It was like 40, 50 mile an hour gusts on the rim. But it ended up being nice down in the canyon because most of it's protected. It's only towards the top, 2 miles where you're really dealing with wind, if it's windy up on the rim. So I actually had really nice weather. I mean, we had lightning crack, or actually a rock slide. We thought it was lightning, but it ended up being a rock slide, I heard. It was just like, it was a great day. It was perfect weather, running weather,
And what's going on between the years? Are you listening to podcasts or music, or are you just trying to stay in the moment?
No, I didn't have any, I didn't do any music. I just doing what I do in 100, and that's just, you kind of check out and flow, find it. And for me, at least, like your mind kind of goes all over the place, but it's easy for me too when I'm trying to race or go fast. It's just to be focused in the moment of like flowing and relaxing and checking in on yourself and like, okay, am I pushing too hard? No, you're not pushing. You're okay, or maybe you need to back off just a little. It's the first lap, that kind of thing. So just always checking in that way.
Well, speaking of hundreds, let's talk about it. We're here, Hardrock 2022.
Yeah.
When I ask you about Hardrock, what is the first story that comes to mind for you? Because you've done it a handful of times, and some epic,
it is a big
memorable moments. What's number one?
Getting pinned down by lightning in American Basin in 2014. Me, Jason Coop, and
Adam Campbell.
Adam Campbell got over the top of Handy's, and Coop and I were right behind him in the basin. It got dark, started pouring on us, and then started splash booming and hitting the ground all over the place around us at 13,000 feet. And you have no place to hide except a slabby rock. There's one or two spots you could really be protected there. And, I came up, Coop, I was right behind him, I wasn't that far back, and he was hunkered down next to this rock. And he goes, I'm not going up there. And I go, good point. And so I'll join you. So we just hung out, and then Kaburagi showed up from Japan, who's the race director at Mount Fuji. And Justin Engel was his pacer, and then Diana Finkel showed up with her pacer, and we all hunkered down there, man, just pouring on us. My teeth were chattering. I was freezing at every layer I had in my pack on. Just miserable.
And the whole mountain is pretty exposed, right?
Oh, that basin is no trees.
Yeah.
And it was this big storm that was coming all week, and we'd been hearing about, like, this big cell. We don't know when it's going to hit exactly yet, but, and then it was supposed to hit Friday, but it ended up hitting Friday night. And so it was right after dark. It just started, like, dumping. I mean, like, coming down so hard, like pouring rain. And flashing lightning all around us and all over the top of Handy's. And we're supposed to go over Handy's, right? 14,000 feet. We're above tree line. We're totally exposed. And it's like the worst place to be in a lightning storm. And I just, that year sticks out the most because it was so crazy. Coop ended up getting hypothermic and dropping. Kaburagi got hit by a rock slide that year in the face and had sliced his face. He had a bandage on his face when he came up to us when we were hanging out next to that slabby rock. I call it Lightning Rock. Every time I go up to Handy's, like, oh, there's Lightning Rock. That's where I hung out for 70 minutes. It's weird for a race to go on pause, at like 100K in the dark. It's just weird.
So what was the outcome for you? How did you escape how did you get up and over?
So we ended up hanging for a while, and finally Coop bailed. There was a tent. Like, some backpackers had a tent back in the basin, and we had seen.
Oh, that's right.
The infamous tent.
Yeah, so they were on something.
He goes back to the tent and like gets in this guy's sleeping bags. There's two like backpackers in a tent, like riding out the storm up there with a bottle of Southern Comfort. And I think they were stoned. It was the first year that Colorado legalized marijuana. So there's two guys up there baked drinking a half bottle of Southern Comfort down, and then this big dude, all wet, sticks his head in their tent and says, "I need to get in your sleeping bag. I'm hypothermic." So he went backwards. He bailed, and then it was just the three of us with their pacers. So there's 5 of us, and we're all standing there. And finally, Diane is from Colorado, and she's like, it started to kind of move out of the basin, so we weren't really like, it was mainly just flashing on the top of the Handies at that point because it was moving north, kind of northeast, and we're off the southwest side. So she's like, we could hike up to this lake. So that was after about 50 minutes. So it was 70 minutes total, 50 minutes there, and then we hiked it took about 20 minutes, and then we went or about 10 minutes of hiking, and then we stood for another 20 minutes. We're standing in slushy snow, still raining. And we're like in our rain gear, like looking up at the thing, and we're all counting. Every time there's a flash or a boom, a flash to boom, we were going 1001 out loud, all of us. 1001, 1002, and that boom. Oh, it's too soon, And it kept happening, and so finally, once it hit 7 seconds, we all kind of it was like this weird agreement, arbitrary number. Like, okay, let's go. Everybody want to go? Yeah, I'm freezing. Let's go. And so. Which is, in hindsight, was stupid because, 7 seconds is nothing, right? So we go up on top, and I'm freezing. I'm by myself. I don't have pacer, right? So I'm like power hiking with my freaking poles and just up the hill, because you got another about 800 feet of climbing,
Yeah, screw the peanut butter at this point.
I just want to get warm.
Yeah.
I just want to get over the top of this thing as fast as possible. So I gap all of them. Maybe 50, 60 yards at the top or 80 yards. I don't know. And I'm already over the top. And right when you step off the top, there's kind of like a rocky section of like, it's maybe 5 moves. And then it's kind of a flat trail for about 40 yards or 50 yards. And then it drops off a point. And it's a really knife ridge you have to go down. Super technical. Well, I step off the top, and that point that you have to go to and drop off of where the trail goes off the lip gets struck by lightning. Oof. And puts me on the ground. And at the time, and anybody's seen a picture of me, I have hoop earrings that are like, they're like stretched and everything. And I had metal ones. I had stainless steel ones in at the time. And I remember thinking, I got metal in my ears, and like I'm freaking like a weather vane up here, like a lightning rod. So I like just ran bent over like as fast as I could, had my poles out and hucked like I was skiing downhill, and like, just hit that as hard as I could until I got down. It's probably a mile at least down to like you get into the tundra. And then you still have another mile at least before you hit tree line. So you're still exposed, but I was at least wanting to get off this knife ridge where you're like just out, you're out in it. And so like I just like, it was full adrenaline rush. And I got down to the tundra, and there's a post and some big rocks. I just remember standing next to it like a trail post in the grass. And I was just like, and like, then I was like sweating. So I'd been freezing. So I like take off my Houdini pants and like put them in my pack, dump my shoes out because there's scree in them and mud, and, because I've just gone reckless abandon off of Handies off the north side. And then I was like, still like there was every once in a while we get a flash in the basin that I was in Grizzly Gulch, because it was moving the direction I'm running. So at this point, I'm like, I just got to get to tree line, So I'm like hammering to tree line. It was a trippy. I was never really comfortable the rest of the night. It was cold all night. It rained on and off for 10 hours that night. It was that was my hardest hard rock.
And did you ever come across Adam?
No, because we ended up stopping for 70 minutes and he got over.
Okay.
So he ended up in third. I ended up in fourth. And I think I was a ways back because of that 70-minute stop, and he was able to continue and not stop.
Yeah, so the lightning...
I was only 10 minutes behind him at that point, I think.
His story is the lightning hit the ground.
All around
him. Blew out his headlamp.
Yep, blew his battery out, and then he had a pacer, and his pacer's headlamp didn't get blown out. Or vice versa, I don't know which. But they only had one headlamp between two of them to get off of Handies down to the Burroughs aid station.
Let's talk about the year that you won Hardrock.
Yeah,
and we can
I have some crazy stories from this. I saw a mountain lion that year, 2 mountain lions.
Where was this?
In Pole Creek, like hammering down Pole Creek when you leave Cataract Lake, and I was on the trail and I caught movement. I was by myself, no pacer, and it was on a rock above me, and it moved with me. It got up, stood, and walked the direction, because I started walking and looking because I saw something move, and I look up above me, and it's above me on this rock outcropping, and I'm like, so I turn around when it walks, I turn around and faced it, so I'm blinding it, and I yell at it, and she had another one next to her, so like there's another one laying down next to her, like full size, another cat, so 2 cougars. So I'm like, I backed away, but luckily the trail went around the corner, and you couldn't see her anymore because the rock outcropping ended. And so I basically, when I couldn't see her and she couldn't see me, I took off running because it's kind of downhill following Pole Creek. And I'm just like hammering, like, what? That's at mile like 80 something. I'm like hammering as hard as I can go. Like I'm running like tempo pace, you know, it's a slight downhill on trail. I'm just hammering. I would go like 40, 50 yards at first and then come to a fleet skidding stop and like look behind me and scan for eyes. And then I'd like do it again. I did it like 3 or 4 times and then never saw anything. So finally I'm just like, I'm running hard. I'm just, and I went all the way to almost to Pole Creek aid station where there's a confluence of creeks and you have to cross the creek and then climb up to this knoll where you can see the aid station lights. And I got down to there when I could see the aid station, I kind of like relaxed. I've been probably pushing for like 30 minutes at like mile 80, you know, burning matches. And then, you know, after I left the aid station, it was like it's a slow climb up and over this little pass down into Maggie's. And I was just like, and you're at like 11,500, 12,000 feet. And I was just like, it really hit me like, oh my God, I think I'm going to die. You know, but that was like, I think that was 2016, the Cougars. But 2018, I was in second all day. Xavier was in the lead. And then I got turned around at night with the beaver dam around Cataract Lake again, or up around that area in Pole Creek. There was a new beaver dam, and so the trail went through. They bushwhacked you above the beaver dam. You used to just cross the creek, and now you had to go above it, above the water because it was deeper, and then you had to cross through all these willows, and you're bushwhacking through all these willows, and it turns you all around. And then I came out and started climbing on a trail, and I got about a mile. I hadn't seen a flag. I'm like, this doesn't look right. I'm like scanning around in the, you know, at the formations around me in the dark with my headlamp on high beam, and like, this doesn't look familiar, you know, but it's in the middle of the night and you're tired. So I finally had that, you know, that moment. I hadn't carried my phone with a GPX route. I had actually had the thought before the race. I actually had decided consciously, like, no, it's too much weight.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I'm looking up and I'm just like, okay, I got to turn around. Like go backwards like over a mile. I think it was 2.4 miles total, 1.2 miles back. And I descend all the way back down to the creek. And I had an hour lead on third at that point. And then I look across the creek and Troy Howard's hiking up with his pacer. I'm like, oh man, they've almost caught me. You know, I had an hour lead on them. So then I'm like, and I cut back to a flag and I go, oh crap, I'm on the race course. Like I'm on course. I'm not off course. So I turn around and then I'm like burning matches because I'm like all this adrenaline of him almost catching me. Mm-hmm. And so then I like run up. And was
it a foregone conclusion at this point that Xavier was going to win because he had such a
he had about, well, before I went wrong, I think he had about an hour on me, something like that. So I was just racing for second, you know. So I'm just trying to like hold third off. I'm like, I got second, you know. I got an hour lead on second. I'm trying to run Xavier down in case he blows up, mm-hmm. but I don't know if he's going to. Right. I'm just trying to execute the race. And then I get into Cunningham at 92, right? First thing in the morning. And one of the photographers goes, I'm not supposed to tell you, but you're in the lead. I'm like, what? Like, what about Xavier? He's like, yeah, you got DQ'd. I don't know the story, man. Like, he goes, you just got DQ'd. And I was like, well, you know, for me, the first thought was like, oh, man, that sucks. He got DQ'd. But then I was also like, then the second thought is like, holy crap, you're in the lead in Hardrock. You need to like, that guy's not that far back.
Yeah.
Right? You know, second place was third place, is not very far back. So like I got in there and was like throwing things out of my pack. I go, lighten up, you know. I gotta go up Little Giant. You're gonna go up 2,400 feet in 1.9 miles. So I just went out of there like crazed maniac. Don't blow it, you know.
And when you're climbing up, at that point, do you hear second place behind you?
So one of my this is one of the things I've always done too. If you're ever in the lead, you don't always have the beta of how far someone's behind you, so you listen for the aid station. So I look at my watch when I left the aid station, and then I listen for them cheering at the aid station because you're right above the aid station for a while because you're climbing up that rock face. It's steep. We stared at it all week in Cunningham. It's so steep.
Yeah, it's like that climb out of Green Gate where you listen for the river to see how far back the next person is.
Yeah, so I was just listening, and it was like 10 minutes or 9 minutes or something like that. And
Troy Howard still?
No, it was Jeff Rome had passed Troy Howard.
Okay.
From Maggie, somewhere around Maggie on the way over.
So there's a whole flurry of activity behind you.
Yeah, he was closing hard. And so you can see down the switchbacks, and I was power hiking hard on my poles. You're in the lead at Hardrock, don't blow it, And I look down, and I can see like about 5 switchbacks down, and I can see Jeff Rome, who I thought was Troy Howard, but it's Jeff Rome just like freaking power hiking hard with his poles. And I'm like, I think he's moving faster than me, So I got to move faster, So it was a trip, it was surreal because I didn't have time to process the win, But I think Joe Grant probably put it in the best perspective after the race because I was like kind of bummed about it at first. I was like, man, I didn't want to win like that.
Right.
And, over like a DQ and like what happened. But then, Joe was like super level headed. He had just been like, he just goes, Bronco, you're super consistent. You're always there, man. And sometimes like when you're consistent like that, you're just handed it. Like you're there to take it. He goes, if you hadn't been consistent, you wouldn't be there to take it. And I was like, good point.
Yeah.
And from then I was okay with it after that.
Yeah, the only thing you can do is execute your own
race.
Day and your race.
You can't control anyone else's race and what they do and whether they decide to take aid outside of an aid station.
So is that more or less your approach going into this year with all the hoopla around Francois and Killian? Or just kind of in the shadows looking, going, you know what, if I'm consistent, you never know.
We have a huge field, right, man? We have John Kelly and Danny Young and Dakota and Mike Wolf, I think's here too, and right. So like, there's a lot of potentially really strong, fast guys. So, I just run my race and chips fall where they may.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the future a bit. After Hardrock, you have your first 200-mile race.
I do
coming up.
Yeah, Moab 240 in October.
Yeah. Talk about your thought process in signing up for that, and what you're hoping to figure out about yourself.
Well, I signed up for last year.
I
signed up for Bigfoot.
Yeah.
It was going to be my first 200. My wife's whole family lives in the Pacific Northwest, so we were going to go back visit family in August, and I was going to run the race, and I had friends coming up from Bend to crew, and I'd done everything. I'd done my drop bags, I'd done my spread sheets, I planned everything. All my gear was packed, and we drove most of the way there, and my wife and son got COVID. And then we just turned around and like barreled all the way back. And then the rest of the family got COVID. And then we just hunkered down in August and home and got over that. And I got back to training and ended up running in the fall. But then I didn't get my 200. I wanted to do a 200. My whole goal was like, I wanted to run a 200 when I turned 50. Like that was kind of like, I turned 50 last August. So I was like, it was like 2 weeks or a week after I turned 50. So I was like, I'm just going to go run a 200, man. I need to get this under my belt. I've coached it. I've helped Mike McKnight to his Triple Crown win and a bunch of, that kind of stuff with coaching. And I just was like, I knew it on paper, but as a coach, you always want to be like, I want the experience. Like, I want the raw, dirty, like firsthand experience of like being able to talk to it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so when that fell through, I went and helped Mike at Moab last year run the course record. Paced him the last 70 miles. And
which is what, by the way, 240 miles. How long does a course record for that?
It was a 15-hour pace. It was a long pace.
Yeah.
It's a long. Jeez. I'll never pace that long again.
Jeez.
Just saying that, Mike, right now, if you're listening, I ain't ever pacing 70 miles again. I'll pace 30 or 40.
Yeah.
Maybe even 50. But like, I just wanted to get a feel, and that's one of the reasons I signed up to pace him. And then once I'd done Moab, I was kind of like, Moab's only like 5 hours from my house, and the logistics are so much easier from like a travel perspective and all that I just decided to do Moab. And it's at the end of the season, and that means I can still run fun hundreds all summer and not work myself in August and then be thrashed in case I'm really, really thrashed. I have no idea.
So does this at least, I don't know, get the butterflies going because it's so beyond what you've done before?
There's some unknowns there, man. Like I definitely have to say, like as it's going to get closer, I haven't really thought about that much yet, but there were some butterflies with Bigfoot. Like it definitely, because it's new, and it's like there's all these the extra logistics. It's like 100 milers on steroids, you know, like because all the logistics. There's just so much more, and you have to deal with like more sleep deprivation, and you know, how are you going to like follow and stay on the course when you can't even keep your eyes open? You know what I mean? Like this is where pacers become more important. You know, hundreds you're fine without a pacer. Like you get through one night, you know, but 2-3 nights, you know, potentially.
Yeah, guys like Mike McKnight are absolutely bonkers and insane, and Courtney too. I mean, she's put in a couple of
she's put it down milers. Really. She's at the second fastest time at Moab.
Yeah. I don't know what it is about the appeal of 200s, multi-day of sleep deprivation. Sounds like absolute torture to me, but you're going to be in a beautiful place.
It might be one and done. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. Maybe I'll just do one so I have the experience. I can coach it, but I'm not going to do it again. I don't know. Maybe I really like hundreds.
Yeah,
I really
do. So let's talk about the macro as it pertains to your life. You're 50 going on 51. Like, what are you hoping to get out of this beyond just, you know, like maybe a 200 here and there to satisfy your curiosity of something beyond a 100-miler? But if you were to end tomorrow your career, your first ballot Hall of Famer, just given your resume, talk about your future in the next few years for Bronco Billy, what it looks like.
Man, this goes around and around in my head. Like I want to continue. I guess for me, I'm at the point where I just want to be a good, like, I want to inspire people to what's possible, you know, when you're older. You know, at this point now I'm on this longevity and strength and mobility and like nutrition kick. Like, how long could I keep this rolling? You know, because I'm still motivated to train hard. I still don't feel like I'm 50, you know, I feel like I'm young. So as long as I can keep that rolling, I'll keep doing it as long as I can, as long as I'm motivated. You know, keep competing hard as long as my body will allow it, and you know, and I feel like I'll know when it's time to take a step back a little bit. You know, from racing hard.
Yeah.
I'm still not ready to do that yet, though.
Well, in all your years of and all your miles of experience, if there's something you can distill down by way of like advice for either longevity or finding your purpose, what would your advice be to somebody out there hoping to achieve some facsimile of success?
Of longevity.
Yeah.
Nutrition, strength, and mobility. So the things that aren't running become exponentially more important.
Just taking on the holistic approach.
You got to do the little things. You no longer can just get by like going and running a bunch of mileage and then sitting on the couch and eating cookies. You know, you're like, it just doesn't work anymore. Like
the ultra marathon man approach of ordering a pizza and eating it. Yeah.
It just is going to catch up to you, right? It's eventually metabolically, you know, all that kind of stuff. It just, you know, I don't know. I just feel like that's where I saw the biggest change was diet change and the strength and mobility that I've really embraced the last decade. That has really kept me like feeling and bouncing back and feeling younger and not feeling so inflamed and not feeling like, oh my God, these things are killing me. You know, like, I mean, I felt like that in my mid 40s. I know where people are coming from. I felt the same way. I looked at my wife and like, I don't think after 100, I was like 44. I'm like, I don't know how much longer I can do this. Like, I think I'm about ready to retire, like from racing hard. And she was like, okay, you know, it's fine, you know, but then I found the diet change and like I explored and was open to trying something that was like kind of out of like not the norm, definitely not the mainstream. And especially at the time, in 2016, there's a lot more talk about it now, but back then there was hardly any, you know, there's only a few people doing it. And I don't know, it worked.
Well, I don't know if this is necessarily a one-size-fits-all type of thing, or maybe it is.
I don't know. I mean, I think there's so, I mean, there's so many different ways you can tweak based on it. I do think that, like, you know, for most people, and you know, what we talking this week is like an animal-centered diet, animal-based diet, you know, with like fruit and potatoes and like real food, like hunter-gatherer diet, you know, a primal diet, you know, or you're trying to mimic a primal diet in a technological age, you know, of convenience, where you're bombarded with comfort foods and super sweet, sugary, yummy, tasting, smelling foods all the time, all around you. And you have to be able to like have that willpower to say no to them. That's the hardest part, you know? Yeah. And I mean, I have a bunch of overweight people in my family, and they struggle every day. So I get it. It's hard. It takes a lot of discipline. You know, it's easier when you're, okay, I would say this. It is easier when you are a united front. My wife and I are a united front on this. So we are, I would argue she gives me a little bit of trouble because I cheat every once in a while. You know?
Wow. So there's a stricter Browning in
I'm not the strict one.
All right.
No, my wife's the strict one. She can, like, on the straight and narrow, man. She can go forever and not cheat. But I am like, I have to like loosen the reins a little bit. Yeah. It keeps me sane.
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, I mean, thank you for just, I'm glad we finally got the time to do this.
I'm stoked we got
like the day before your big race.
I'm glad we waited because we've gotten to know each other better.
Yeah.
Great.
A lot of quality time at Cunningham Gulch.
Yep.
But yeah, best of luck tomorrow at Hardrock. I'm sure you'll crush it.
Yeah, thanks, Bill.
And thanks for taking the time to do this finally.
Yeah, giddy up, buddy.